name is Rasha Shaaban and I'm working at the World Cultural Museum in Gothenburg. I'm working as a project manager and the coordinator of the Anna Lindh Foundation network in Sweden. We are a national museum. We are part of a group of 4 national museums in Sweden, and we are an open space for culture and arts, and also we have a conference center, so we host events and activities in Gothenburg. In Sweden, most of the refugees communities are coming from Syria, from Afghanistan, from Somalia. Also, I know that there are a few thousands that came recently from Eastern Europe, such as in Albania, but the majority actually is coming from Syria, Iraq. I forgot to mention Iraq as well. Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan. These are the 3 main countries where refugees are coming from in Sweden. Well, to talk about our work with refugees, I'm going to talk about 2 things. The first one is the exhibitions that the museum hosts. So last year in 2016, we opened a big exhibition in Gothenburg on Afghanistan. It was called Afghan Tales. And it's a collection of photography that depicts life in Afghanistan. And all of the photos were taken by Afghan photographers. And the exhibition lasted for almost 14 months. And access to this exhibition was free of charge. And this year we're having an opening of another exhibition on Syria. It's called Aswat, Syrian Voices. It's called Syrian Voices. And this exhibition is in collaboration with the Swedish National Television, SVT. And we are going to screen a collection of stories recorded and filmed of Syrian refugees who came to Sweden mostly at the end of 2015. It's a project produced by the Swedish National Television, SVT, called #Syria200. And we selected a collection of these, so you have 200 stories. So we selected a collection of around 14 stories to tell. And as part of each exhibition that we host at the museum, we run and develop a whole program to attract people to come to visit the exhibition, as well as take part in cultural activities around this theme. So, for example, last year we did with the Afghan exhibition, we did dancing courses, we did concerts, Afghan music, and this year with the Syria exhibition, we're planning to do again the same with the concerts. The opening of the exhibition is planned to be on the 23rd of September in Gothenburg, and hopefully we're going to attract a big public from the Syrian community, as well as the local community in Gothenburg, because the museum is one of the biggest museums in Gothenburg, and access to the museum is free of charge. So we have a wide public to visit the museum. Last year, we joined the consortium of partners to apply for the Creative Europe program. It's a big EU program to support creative work. And the theme was refugees integration. So at the museum, we are implementing in Sweden a series of digital storytelling workshops in which we bring together local residents in Gothenburg, as well as members of refugee community or newcomers to Sweden, which we also consider local residents of Gothenburg, because now they are living in Gothenburg. So the idea is that we teach them about what is storytelling and what are the elements of suspense and how can you make an interesting story. So we organized the first round of this digital storytelling workshops. It's called IHOP. It's a mashup word in Swedish. Ihop means together and hopp means hope. So the theme of these workshops are about hope and togetherness. And we managed to bring together a group of 14 participants in the first round, and we're actually running the second round next week. mid-August. And we're hoping also to get more participants who can participate in it. We're going to run a round of IHOP in Malmö during the Opportunity Space Festival. Each participant basically needs to come up with one story. It has to be for 1 minute or less, and they need to create some suspense, so that you watch the story and you want to know what is happening. So, for example, we had a story from a Syrian refugee talking about the time when he was tortured and disappeared, and how he had to flee with his family from Syria. You have another Swedish talking about the time when she got the news that she got accepted to join the filming or acting school in Gothenburg, which was her dream, and another one talking about the time when she went to dance tango in Istanbul. So I mean, it doesn't matter how serious or how dramatic the story is. At the end of the day, the story means something to the person who's telling it. And I personally, apart from managing this project, I also took part in this project, and it has been such a wonderful and very interesting experience to work on this and use this innovative method of digital storytelling, because most of the time we work with storytelling, but the digital component adds a lot of excitement to the story, that you watch the person, you watch photos or films, that they add to this 1 minute. And the final stories, the final collection of stories, they will be screened at the Trans-Europa Festival in Madrid this October, that is organized by European Alternatives. It's a transnational organization working on arts, culture, democracy beyond borders and beyond nation states. So that was our project on digital storytelling, supported by Creative Europe program. I mean, it's easy, but it's also challenging. For example, we all know that there are thousands, more than, in 2015, Sweden was the largest country per capita to receive the biggest number of refugees. And you can walk down the street and you see a lot of Middle Eastern faces, you see a lot of Afghan faces. But for example, while recruiting participants to come to this digital storytelling, it's not that easy to actually access the refugee community, and you need to go to certain places and you need to know certain people, and to get, for example, participants who are from Afghanistan, unaccompanied minors, you need to access and write to certain people. You can't just easily, think you can publish and post on Facebook and then people will just come easily. No, it's there is a lot of protection of data. There is a lot of privacy for the lives of these unaccompanied minors in Sweden. So it can be really challenging to get them to participate. There is a lot that is happening in Sweden. You have big funding, big support from the government, from the EU, where you can apply for projects and get funds. But again, I mean, you have the competition. To be honest, working with digital storytelling, we didn't see anybody else working with digital storytelling, at least according to our knowledge or my knowledge. Many people are trying to do a lot of things and try to bring a lot of newcomers and refugees. There is always the sensitivity of the question of refugees and are we only doing things for them, and what about the others that did not come from Syria or from Afghanistan and they need help and so on. You have the challenge of the waiting time. Here in Sweden, you can spend maybe 16 months until you get a decision, minimum 16 months, until you get a decision whether you are allowed to stay or not. So during this gray zone time, I mean, it's some they tend to participate in things, in activities, in projects, internships, and so on, and some just fall into depression. So it's not, as I said, it's easy because you have the funding, you have the support from the state, but on the other hand, it can be challenging to reach out to the communities who would like to participate in activities, because you need to imagine, I mean, it's someone was just having a normal life, going to university, doing all of this, and then all of a sudden now he becomes a target group for integration activities. And so this is, I mean, can be quite tough or hard on some people. But for example, during EHOP, we had one of the Syrian participants. He came to Sweden less than a year ago, and he said that before he took part in this project, he was feeling very down from the waiting and thinking about his life back home and so on. He's in his early mid-20s. And he said, because his story was about, as I said, hope and togetherness. So his story was talking about how he can finally live and, experience life in Sweden and so on. And then after the workshop was over, and when he watched the final story that he came up with after doing the editing and so on, he was like, watching this 1 minute made me rethink, why should I be depressed? I just said I'm happy to be here. So I should really get out of this depression or negativity feelings and just do something. And that was for me worth all the effort, all the nights working on editing and subtitling and all of this. So, because I'm sure to do 1 minute to put subtitles for 1 minute can take up to 3 hours. So it was totally paid off just to hear this sentence. Yeah. The biggest complaint about that you hear often from the newcomers is that Swedish people or the Swedish community, the society is closed on itself. And it's really so hard to have access to Swedish people, and this is why many of them, they end up in this so-called ghetto, and then you end up with all of this segregation and so on. So this is a recurrent complaint that you hear. Another one is about the waiting times. Many of them, they complain about this waiting time from the migration board to take a decision whether they will stay, whether they will be deported, and so on. So this is these are on top of the complaints that you get from the newcomers to Sweden. How do we overcome this? I mean, at the museum, our activities are open to any person, because first of all, it's free of charge, so anyone can come, can visit the exhibitions. And even this Creative Europe program, EHOP, with working with digital storytelling, we really didn't want to work only with refugees or newcomers, because the ultimate goal is integration. So how can you integrate if you're not involving the Swedish community or expats or people who are even migrants, because from other European countries or abroad coming to work or live in Gothenburg. So this is what we try to do through this digital storytelling workshop, to bring participants who are newcomers, refugees, unaccompanied minors, together with established residents in Gothenburg from Swedish background or from European or international background. Yeah. I just think of mainly 3 things at the moment. Of course, there is a lot to do, but first, you need to reduce the waiting times to get a decision, because you decide about the rest of your life. So imagine you spend 1.5 years in Sweden getting used to a certain life standard, and then, excuse me, you have to go back to Afghanistan, or you need to go back to Iraq, this is very frustrating, and this is why we hear a lot about suicide among especially the young refugees who come to Sweden. So reduce the waiting times, that's one thing. Integration or establishing refugees in the community is not just about providing them with jobs. These are people who left their countries because of war. They didn't have an easy journey. They didn't come through economy or first class journey. They had a tough journey. You need to work on trauma healing and psychological repair for these people before you put them into jobs. And finally, of course, jobs. That's how you get to meet Swedish people and get integrated. There is a study that says that it takes an average of 7 years for migrants and refugees to find a job in Sweden. That's a lot. So, I mean, but we know as well that the employment agency in Sweden, Arbetsförmedling, they are doing a lot of work and they get a lot of support from the state financially and everything. And the records are improving for employment. But, I mean, without employment, people would just continue to remain again in the ghettos, no integration, segregation. Yeah, so to sum up, reduce the waiting time, trauma healing, and of course, integration through job market.